Hi, welcome to LawWiser, India's first video-only knowledge-sharing platform for the legal community. Welcome to our UK Unlock 22 series powered by IndusLaw, hosted by LawWiser on exploring post-Brexit business opportunities for UK India. Last year, around this time, we released the UK Unlock 21 series, where we focused on the post-Brexit UK-India relationship. Well, a year has gone by and, post-Brexit, a lot has happened between the two countries, coming on to deciding for early harvest trade deals, to FTAs, the free trade agreements, and also a lot is happening for the UK-India Roadmap 2030. To focus on, the upcoming FTA talks, there has been a lot of expectations as well. To discuss what are these, factors that are working towards the enhanced trade partnership for both the countries, the issues regarding trade barriers, and which are those key sectors and key issues that are part of this upcoming dialogue of FTA. To discuss this, we have a panel of experts. Joining us would be Mr. Phillip. He is partner, commercial dispute resolution, and co-head India Group at Penningtons, Manches. Joining him would be Mr. Amarjit Singh. He is CEO at India Business Group, headquartered in London. And along with him, we have Mr. Shashi Mathews. He is partner, part of taxation team at IndusLaw law firm at the Delhi office. Welcome, Phillip, Amarjit, and Shashi. Thank you for joining us and taking out time for this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to begin our conversation, I just highlighted about the fact that, there's been early harvest trade deal talks and UK-India. Considering the UK-India roadmap of 2030, they are looking at to lock in these deals as soon as possible as priority for both of them. And there is this newfound importance for the free trade agreements, the FTAs as popularly called. And, it's gaining a lot of importance for trade regimes of both the countries, UK and India. And considering India is now also working towards FTA talks with other countries to strengthen its trade regime in the region. So, Phillip, to begin with, if you can just throw some light, why are these FTAs getting this newfound importance?
So thanks, Anya, and it's great to be here. So the India has, of course, had FTAs with a number of countries over a number of years, and so has the UK. And I think the real impetus why this is gaining so much traction, why it's of such interest, is because of something that happened in the last year. So almost exactly a year ago, on the 15th of November, 15 countries signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, creating the largest trading bloc globally, covering over 2 billion people. And India was expected to be part of that, but then decided to stay out of that bloc. Around 6 weeks after that, Britain formally left the EU when the transition period ended with the EU on the 31st of December 2020. So the EU, again, being one of the largest at that time trading blocs in the world. So you had 2 countries which were staying out of these very large trading blocs. And I guess the key driver here is to try and look at enhancing trade, replacing some of the trade that might be affected by being outside these very large blocs, and doing that on a bilateral basis, which is why, as you say, India has looked at fast-tracking FTAs with the UK, UAE, Canada, and others, and the EU, so as to have a focused push and growth in selective sectors, thereby actually enhancing trade, increasing the amount of exports from India to the UK, from the UK to India, and I'm focusing on that corridor. And I think the other thing is also, as where we are today, where we've just had COP26 and a real focus on preventing climate change or reducing the effects of climate change. I think the other key driver is also to try and harness new technologies that are going to provide sustainable products, solutions, and moving away or phasing down reliance on fossil fuels. And this is particularly so where some of the key exports between the countries do have, let's say, reliance on fossil fuels or are derived from fossil fuels. So, for instance, plastics and packaging, and also some of the heavy industry and manufacturing. So, again, the focus may be to try and use technology, use emerging technologies, sustainable and green solutions to transition into new products, new export products.
Yeah, thank you, Phillip, for actually throwing light on why FTAs are being now considered and taking us back to last year and how things were developing. So taking from there, Shashi and Amarjit, do you have any pointers to add on for the importance of part of it?
Sure. I mean, I echo the sentiments and thoughts mentioned by Phillip, and it's a hugely exciting time for UK-India relations, and the political backdrop has never been more favorable at the highest levels of UK and Indian governments. And since the launch of the UK-India 2030 roadmap announced earlier this year in May by both prime ministers, there's a clear sense of focus and urgency to strengthen bilateral relations and open up markets for economic growth in both directions. And of course, both governments have set a fairly ambitious target of doubling bilateral trade within the next 10 years. So from its current level of 23 billion GBP, doubling that within 10 years, which is a huge ambition. But equally, we must remember the roadmap is much wider than just trade and investment, and it covers security, defense, as you've heard, climate change, healthcare, education, and people-to-people connections, which the Honorable Prime Minister of India often refers to as the living bridge connecting India and the diaspora globally. And in recent months, we've seen a refreshed FTA strategy coming out of Delhi, where there is commitment to fast track a small number of FTAs with key allies and partners, as you've heard, with the UK, UAE, Australia, Canada, with a view to growing the economy within India and within those regions, particularly as all countries have felt the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and all economies are putting together ambitious strategies to kind of build back better and greener from the pandemic. And I think early harvest deals are important because they create excitement, confidence, and momentum. Momentum for investors and businesses and exporters within the respective countries to do business on what is often a small number of selective areas where it's considered low-hanging fruit. And also we have to remember that complex, all-encompassing free trade agreements take time to negotiate and come to fruition. And so therefore, there has to be a kind of structured and sustainable incremental process which is introduced to make progress. I'll just stop there.
Yeah, so I'll just take off from what Amarjit said, that in terms of an early harvest scheme, what is important is that both governments get an insight into what trade and what businesses want. India is really trying hard to shed its protectionist image that is there. And an early harvest scheme and an FTA eventually will lead us to a comprehensive strategic partnership. And UK has that with 4 countries. I think a greater deal of cooperation between both countries will be seen once the FTA is completed. That's all.
Thank you, Amarjit. You exactly. I guess that's the most awaited thing between UK and India is to complete this FTA and set ground rules and to start going ahead. That actually takes us to the next part of it. Considering there have been certain talks on the barriers that exist and that needs to be crossed before these FTAs are formalized. One such is obviously a taxation issue that's concerning both UK and India. So, Shashi, I'll start with you. If you can throw light on, what are these taxation issues in, that are barriers in free trade for both these countries?
Sure. Thanks, Anya. Before getting into the barrier itself, I'll just put out some statistics which would sort of give a direction to this conversation. On an average basis, the tariff on goods imported into UK is about 4 to 5%, and whereas goods which are imported to India, the average tariff can go up to 15%. More importantly, in some areas like Scotch whiskey and automotives, it can go up right to 120 to 150%. Having a sort of image that India is protecting its economy also leads to the fact that we do not have access to better technology. We do not have access to better products. And I think removing those barriers, especially high tax barriers, would enable the Indian economy not only to be Atmanirbhar, as we call it, but also make in India and export to the world. And that is absolutely key to reducing the taxes and the tariffs of certain products into India. There are, there are practices, there are subsidies, there are incentives which Indian companies get. But I'll give you an example. Bottled alcohol, when it comes into India, it probably carries a tag of 150%. But even bulk alcohol, which is an intermediate product for eventually making the final alcohol, that also carries a high tax bracket. The effect of that is India loses out on the export market for alcohol, and India only exports a very small number of alcohol brands across the world. Same thing with automotives. I think for both countries, the crucial aspect is finding product lines, finding goods which both countries complementarily can reduce tariff on, and that would lead to a sort of a better market. And keep in mind that India is a pretty big market. And at the end of the day, while the government may think that lowering the taxes may hurt the exchequer, it's actually the reverse. More consumption, a bigger market access that UK gets into India is definitely beneficial for both countries. And I think that is key to reducing the tariffs and the taxes on various products into India. Apart from taxes and somewhere related to taxes also, the customs compliance procedures, and that's something that India and UK are already working on. In fact, our cabinet recently approved it also, that there will be greater cooperation between both customs authorities, and a lot of the labeling, packaging mandates, certification, all of those could get ironed out and give greater access to UK companies into India. On the contrary, I think from an Indian perspective, what India would expect is areas like textiles and leather also for that matter, where India is not seen as a preferred market from an import perspective. If that were to ease out for India and UK, that would definitely help Indian exporters. I think that's the main points that I have.
Very well put, Shashi. Rather, sharing those data kind of helps our audience as well to understand these intricacies. A lot of time people don't understand and why there is need to open, as you specified, certain goods. They need to identify those sectors where the tariff barriers need to go down to increase that consumption, and overall the market share will also increase. So that's very well put, Shashi. Amarjit and Phillip, your takes on this here?
I was going to add that one of the issues with taxation that India has faced has also been retrospective taxation, particularly of larger deals. Vodafone, for one, comes to mind. Ken is another, but really this is about certainty when you're doing business. So if you take the UK as an example, you have a relatively certain mindset when you're doing business here, what the tax is going to be, and you deal with it, and you pay your tax, and that's kind of it. And if you have to contest it or appeal it, you deal with it that way. So one of the issues that India's had is the retrospective taxes that have been levied. And I think that way the Taxation Laws Amendment Act, which came in August, is a much needed and a huge step forward. And I think it's very welcome from a trade perspective. I think this is something that really boosts confidence in the ability to set up joint ventures and partnerships or investment into India, and not have the risk of the rules delivering a kick down the line. So I think that's a really very, very, very positive step.
And businesses need certainty and confidence in the markets within which they choose to operate. And therefore, it's vital that in the upcoming FTA discussions, both governments give very careful thought to a comprehensive package of provisions and protections on taxation, which will help both nations stand out from the crowd in terms of being attractive, safe, and secure investment destinations. And I think on the retrospective taxes amendment tabled in India a few months back, as Phillip has mentioned, that's been met with huge positivity and relief from global investors, particularly ending some of the long-running disputes of Vodafone and Cairn Energy. But again, for new investors looking at making fresh, large ticket investments in India, they'll be aware that these controversial provisions have been scrapped, but also I think ensuring that for those investors there are adequate recourse to legal remedies should, in the unlikely event, disputes occur in either nation.
So very well said, Phillip, and Amarjit also throwing light on the fact that about retrospective taxation, which has been like a pain point for India while investors were trying to consider investing in India. But I guess with the coming up of that retrospective amendment, that has also kind of bolstered the ease of doing business aspect for India. So hoping that's going to go towards the positive side as well. And that just takes us to the other aspect, when we are talking about investment. That way, India is also doing a lot of investment in UK with, investing around 120 projects and creating almost or close to 5,000 and over jobs in the UK. It has become the second largest source of foreign, direct investment for UK there. It is right behind United States of America. So, Amarjit, starting with you, if you can share what are the potential issues with respect to trade barriers, considering, India is also now becoming second largest investor in UK. So what are these issues that need to be addressed in the upcoming FTA talks?
Thank you, Sonia. I think, as you say, UK-India relations are in a very good place at present, whereas on the one hand, India is the second largest foreign direct investor in the UK, and of course the UK is the sixth largest foreign direct investor in India. And so that relationship really is bilateral and active and favorable in both directions. But there is always room for improvement. And as we've heard, under the UK-India 2030 roadmap, both prime ministers have agreed and announced a very ambitious agenda to double bilateral trade. Broadly speaking, the barriers can be grouped into two categories: tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, which restrict international trade. and in some cases serve to protect domestic industries. So, for example, from a UK perspective, they will be looking to reduce tariffs on some of the UK's key export goods, such as cars, medical devices, food and drinks. You just heard from Shashi, Scotch whisky is obviously very popular within the UK-India corridor. And from an Indian perspective, they'll be looking at gaining greater market access for engineering and auto components and products, for textiles, for garments, for jewelry, for gems, and the list goes on. Some of the non-tariff barriers which will need to be considered include things like alignment of standards and regulations, certifications within professional service areas, mutual recognition of qualifications within a range of professions. As we've just spoken about, creating investor security and confidence within both markets. And also the ease of doing business will be a very important consideration. And in recent years, it's fair to say that India has made significant strides in improving its ease of doing business. In the last World Bank report, India ranks position number 63 out of 190 countries. But however, more work will need to be done to get India into the top 10 so that it is on a par with the UK. Services will be very important to both countries, as both the UK and India are major players in the export of services. For example, India is well known for exporting software and IT-enabled services. You mentioned some of the large Indian employers in the UK include TCS, Wipro, Infosys. So all the big Indian kind of IT conglomerates have a very active presence in the UK. And from a UK perspective, they'll be looking at some of their key services like financial services, legal services, breaking down barriers in terms of liberalization, consulting services. And also we must remember that the services industries in the UK make up 80% of the UK economy. And so it's a huge area of focus for the UK government. And so I think there will need to be a very kind of open and flexible approach by both countries to these issues. And it will often be a balancing act between weighing up different competing interests. And there'll need to be a genuine spirit of give and take in order to come to the best outcome and to create what should be a win-win for both countries. And ultimately, I think a successful negotiation of a free trade agreement between the UK and India will enable more businesses in both countries to sell their products and services to a wider pool of consumers. And so therefore, not only will it be a win-win for the UK and India, but also for the wider world.
No, I think that's really well put. I think I see, I see this as a win-win for both countries, for both economies. I think in terms of what are the barriers that could be overcome, if I was sitting at the table looking at the FTA between these two countries, I'd say focus on the 3 T's. So the 3 T's for me are, first of all, as Amarjit mentioned, tariffs, and Shashi mentioned earlier in terms of tax. So in terms of tariffs, trying to really encourage trade and try and get more trade flowing, even if that brings in more products. But the value in that is that you can then, you can actually create new industries. You can use the technology that comes with that to create an industry that you can then make in India and export. So you are not just fulfilling Make in India, you're also becoming more Atmanirbhar Bharat. So you're doing, you're achieving those aims through reducing tariffs, through allowing in technology, and so that's the first T. The second T is, again, as I mentioned, related, is technology. So tariffs, technology. That technology allows you to produce, to enhance what you produce, and then hopefully export. So JCB is a great example of this. A British company that's gone into India, has manufactured in India, has successfully built its base in India. It's a household name. If you have a wedding, you've got JCB is ubiquitous, but it's also then taken that and then used India as a manufacturing base and sold out of India into dozens and dozens of countries. And so it's a great example, and that's something that I would be looking to say, well, how can we replicate that? What else can we do where we can replicate that model and increase trade, for not just into using it as an import, but also then using it as an export down the line. The third T is talent. So the UK has taken steps in terms of making it easier in terms of the post-study work visa, for instance, for students to be able to, Indian students to be able to get jobs and work here. The UK has faced labour shortages since it left the EU, and that again is replacing, let's say, your free movement of people with a more focused, skills-based, points-based system, where you can have people coming from India and other parts of the world to the UK, where they have something to contribute. And I think that's something which I think the UK has already done. It makes it much easier to come to the UK. And I think that's something which is only going to enhance the ability of movement of people, skilled people, and enhance the partnership between the countries. India has done the same with the e-visa, which I think, again, makes it easier for people coming to India. I think that talent works the other way too. So if you have companies coming into India, setting up in India with, let's say, engineers, with designers, with managers, you enhance, you pass on those skills, and everyone gets more skills, a different viewpoint, which is then only beneficial in the long run.
Anything to add on, Shashi, here?
Yeah, well, Amarjit and Phillip have covered most points, but just two very short points, which I think would be a potential barrier in this relationship, will be getting the Indian industry to sort of agree to any sort of tariff concession, with the hope that that would bring in more technology and that would make us more efficient and capable for making better products. That's one. Secondly, the legal services market in India, which is quite spoken of about having to get liberalized, that itself would require quite a mindset change, and I believe the Indian government is working towards it, and that should be something that will have to be looked out for in these talks. Yeah.
Very, very well said, Shashi. Adding on to the point of, having that liberal approach is also important. But as Amarjit and Phillip also said, we need to have a flexible approach when we are deciding, what trade barriers, where one has to actually, adjust, and both the countries need to decide on to their priorities. Basis that I think only then, these trade barriers can be overcome. And that takes us to our last question as well. UK High Commissioner Alex Ellis recently said that India is central to the Indo-Pacific framework. So, I would want to take each one of your views here on the upcoming FTA talks and, all that process that's happening for the FTA talks, early harvest trade deal. How do you think it's going to assist in, strengthening the bilateral relationship of UK and India? So, in no particular order, but Shashi, if you would want to start here first.
Yeah, UK has already done about 68 deals since Brexit has happened, and there have been key FTAs which have been signed with Vietnam, Singapore, and other countries. or most of whom pretty much comprise the Indo-Pacific region. And that is all the more reason for India to be there, not only in terms of trade, but also in terms of market share and defense. And that is, I think, quite key for us as bilateral relations to improve. Not only that, strengthening bilateral relations will also lead to opening up jobs and business opportunities across both markets. So that's 2 points that I would like to highlight on this.
So the UK government published its integrated review of security, defence and foreign policy in March of this year, and it was the first major review of this nature since the end of the Cold War, and essentially it sets out global Britain's kind of new policies and priorities post-Brexit. And of course, what was evident within that review was a clear tilt towards the Indo-Pacific region, of which India is a key strategic partner and ally for the UK. And so there is a very strong ambition from the UK government to strengthen its relations with India across the board. A UK-India free trade agreement will be a game changer for both countries because it will unlock new opportunities. It will create more jobs, more wealth, more innovation, more technology, more sustainable impact between the world's fifth and sixth largest economies. And so an FTA between the UK and India will be a really big deal, not just for both countries, but also the wider world.
Phillip, your take here.
I think India is very much central to the Indo-Pacific partnership, and the reason why I think that is because over the last few years, I think we've seen really geopolitical concerns that have grown, and particularly if you look at the Indo-Pacific region, tensions between India and China, for instance, tensions in the South China Sea. So I think there are currently also tensions between the EU and Russia. So I think India is seen as very much very key to having being a central player, a counterweight to China's growing influence, and particularly in terms of strategic investment and again coming back to self-sufficiency or being Atmanirbhar. I think what COVID has taught us is that when you do have a global pandemic, when you have another global issue that affects many countries, then suddenly supply chains are disrupted, and you get issues with getting the raw materials or getting the ingredients that go into drugs, that go into other products that may be very important, very key to a nation. So I think having a stronger bilateral partnership, an FTA between two nations, which are then going to reduce dependency on third countries, is a good thing. I think it then enhances the ability of those two countries, the UK and India, to increase what they are doing in sectors where they are already active in terms of exports, but also perhaps developing some degree of sufficiency in areas that they are currently not very active in, but countries like China and others maybe quite large exporters. So there is some counterbalance that is needed so that these two countries are able to be self-sufficient, be able to cooperate strategically in some key sectors. Defense was mentioned earlier, and others, and also to really upskill from low-value goods to high-value goods. And so that's really, I think, why it's important.
Very, very well said, Phillip, because, as you all just rightly highlighted, there's a lot that needs to be done here, whether they are those taxation barriers or, the service sector industry for UK that can be explored by India. There are a lot of other very small factors, that together come up, and both the countries need to kind of work towards strengthening those relationships. And India has a lot of opportunity to strengthen itself in the Indo-Pacific region as well. So thank you for actually sharing your views and thoughts. Thank you, Shashi. Thank you, Amarjit and Phillip, for taking time out for this and making this such an interesting conversation for an audience. It will really help them understand because a lot has been published about FTAs and all of it, but there are still a lot of details, that the audience is not aware of. What are those issues behind it? So thank you for highlighting each one of them so well. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you,
very
Sonia.
much.
Thank you, Sam. Thank
Best
you.
wishes.